Hello there, just a quick video, and this video is basically about caring for your ratchet, or ratchets, so if you've got multiple ones, which my toolkit does have a few. Now, these are not exactly cheap, some are very expensive, some are very cheap. The one I've got here is middle of the road price-wise. Now, what I tend to do periodically is to actually get inside the ratchet itself and to grease up and clean the entire mechanism. These ones with the switchable top and two screws in the top generally seem to be very similar inside. You've got the main wheel itself, sort of spindle or gear or whatever you want to call it, that the ratchet or sockets go onto. Then you've got a couple of pulls in there, which obviously with the little switch on the top, they sort of flip into position to prevent the ratchet from going in one direction or the other. Now, what tends to happen is I tend to clean a lot of my equipment using WD-40 or something similar, which is quite good for protecting the outside. But what can happen is it can wash out all of the grease inside the unit. Now, it doesn't look like this one was originally greased, but I've got set Halford sockets which were originally packed with grease, and when I went to service them a couple of years back, the grease had actually dried out completely. So for this one I'm using some of the Shimano bike hub lube, which I sort of tend to use on my various bikes whenever I'm doing a full hub strip down and comb bearing service. And because this area isn't sort of really subjected to too much heat, I thought this would be an ideal lube to use in this situation. So what I'm doing is I'm just giving this sort of whole sort of wheel, gear, or whatever you want to call it, a bit of a liberal greasing, putting it back inside the unit, and just putting a bit of grease into the rest of it, just filling the rest of it with grease. Obviously it stops the springs from rusting, stops those pulls from sort of rusting, and just actually makes the whole operation of the ratchet a lot smoother. And then obviously it's just a simple case of reassembly, and gotta be honest, that's pretty much it. There isn't really sort of much else to do. Now, if you do happen to dislodge one of those pulls, which I did yesterday, getting it back in isn't too difficult. Just make sure that you get it into a position where it's not the one that's compressed by that switch at the time, and you can squeeze the spring, and you can actually sort of just with a bit of effort and a little bit of patience you can get the spring back in there. So on this particular ratchet, the spring itself actually did pop out quite easily. I think some of the more expensive ones have got a slightly different mechanism and way of doing it, but this one sort of does it in that particular way. Doesn't work too badly, to be honest, does the job. Now, what I did after putting the grease in was I just gave the outside a bit of a wipe down with a cloth. The cloth isn't covered in anything, it's just literally sort of cloth, nothing on it. And then just sort of lightly test that it rotates in either direction depending on what way that switch is positioned. And trying to rotate it in a reverse direction results in no movement, which is exactly what you want. And that's pretty much it. I would sort of tend to do this sort of once a year, depending on how much you use it. I think you can probably use something like brake cleaner to sort of clean off the old grease. And there you go. And thank you very much for watching. If you've liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, and also consider subscribing for more upcoming fascinating hobbies.